Hello everybody and welcome to another Doctor Who review. This time is a Big Finish audio adventure, Primeval. Okay, quick plot synopsis, well, my plot synopsis of Primeval, written by Lance Parkin. Nissa's psychic attacks have made her gravely ill. The Doctor travels back in time to an earlier time in Traken's history, where he seeks the help of Shayla, a Traken doctor, who in the history of Traken is revered as one of the best doctors in history. On the outskirts of the Traken Union, a force is looking to take over the Union and get revenge. Quandar and his ship of loyalists are plotting and planning to take over the Traken Union. At this time in Traken's history, there is no keeper, only the source. And the source does its own thing and has no real controller of it. The source is so powerful, though, that Quandar cannot enter the Union. And it's later found that Quandar is actually one of the original gods of Traken before the source was created. Quandar used to be a benevolent god, but has become very bitter and wants revenge on the Trakens and to rule them. Nissa's psychic attacks happened because of Quandar, and if it wasn't for Quandar's interference with her Traken mind, Nissa would never have fallen ill in the first place. The Doctor goes to Quandar's ship to try and find a cure for Nissa, and ends up inadvertently helping Quandar to take over Traken. The Doctor has to intervene, enters the source, effectively becomes the first keeper, helping to destroy Quandar completely. Shayla takes over from the Doctor and becomes the first official keeper of Traken, locked into the source for the rest of her life. The Doctor and Nissa leave in the TARDIS. Okay, the 26th Big Finish audio adventure, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor and Sarah Sutton as Nissa. Now this story's great because it's a kind of diving into the history of Traken a bit more, and does seem to establish, and I got this from straight away, more or less, is this when the first Keeper of Traken comes about? So they've established that the source was something that was created by the Trakenites before the Keeper was needed, but obviously the Keeper was needed after a great problem, a great issue, a great evil came about. And in that respect, the story is a very nice prequel to the Keeper of Traken, even though it's done, later on. But in regards to the history of Traken, it's a prequel to what we see in the Keeper of Traken, and obviously ultimately Traken's destruction in the Gopolis. That being said, it's an interesting and nice listen. There's a couple of production things that I'll go into which I don't quite get, I'm quite keen on, but there's quite a lot to love. I'll go into the characters, I go into some of the main cast and go over the characterizations. So we start with the Fifth Doctor, played by Peter Davison. I quite like the way Peter Davison comes across in this one. I think it works quite well for the Fifth Doctor's character. Definitely middle of the road Fifth Doctor. He is the Doctor of circumstance, the Fifth Doctor, most of the time, and this story's no different. He's trying to save Nissa. He ends up getting tangled in Quandar's plans and ends up having a bit of an issue trying to get away from Quandar's influence. It's quite interesting how that all works out, and I quite like the way it's been put across. Peter Davison, he nails the role now. The confidence is back with the portrayal of the Doctor, which was not quite there in the first couple of stories that he did, but it certainly is there in this, and it's really a great performance from Peter Davison. Sarah Sutton as Nissa. Nissa's strong as always. Nissa's been one of my favourite companions of Doctor Who of the classic series. Was my favourite at one point of all the companions in the classic series. That's changed now, but she was at one point one of my favourite companions. And this is a lovely continuation of the stories we've had with Nissa and the Doctor before this, including, of course, Winter for the Adept and The Land of the Dead, both lowly rated stories, but both do tap into Nissa's psychic ability a little bit. It's actually stronger than those stories in regards to the way that Nissa is characterised, and I quite like the way that she's put across in this one, and it's quite a nice little story overall to be listening to, and be part of, really, because yes, she's kind of sidelined for some of the story because she's ill and she's not very well. She seems to build a great relationship with Sabian, Shaylan's assistant, which is nice, and that makes a nice little subplot for her. And her knowledge of Traken does come in later on, of knowledge of how the technology works and how Traken would work with the councils and all that, and it's quite nice the way it's performed. You know, initially Sarah Sutton is a bit sidelined with the character of Nyssa here, but ultimately it's a very nice role, very well written, and I quite like the way that this has been written down and portrayed here. We then have Stephen Grief, who's playing Quandar, the big bad of this story. Quite a malevolent being. I love the voice. I think the voice really works for this character. This kind of tone and malevolence that comes across here. And Stephen Grief is basically utilising his voice acting skills to the max, because you need that kind of malevolence to work for an audio drama. When you don't have the visuals, you need to rely on the voice. And Stephen Grief does a very good job here of doing that, and it's quite nice to hear. I like Quandar as a character. He's quite manipulative. He seems to be all-knowing and seems to be able to dip into the psychic abilities of a lot of people. Most people, all his followers have got psychically linked to him. And he manages to penetrate most of the Doctor's psychic barriers as well. So the Doctor is a bit powerless in this one. He's a bit overpowering. He's maybe a bit too strong, but it's his hubris that kills him in the end. When the fact that he thinks he's taken over the Source, but the Doctor ends up tricking him and actually locks the Source control to him. So effectively Quandar is not effectively a keeper, but the Doctor is. I think it's quite interesting how that all works out, and it's an interesting character overall. I think Stephen Grief does a very good job here. We then have Susan Penhaligon playing Shayla. Now, Shayla is probably closest to the intelligent scientist of Traken this time round. Tremas played it in Keeper of Traken, Anthony Ainley's character Tremas, before he became the Master. And then Susan Penhaligon does that role here for Shayla. I like the way Shayla comes across. She's obviously still got the slight naivety all the Trakenites have of the fact that they're protected with the Source. The Source protects them from everything. Life is good. But she also has a slight scepticism when she sees facts in front of her and doesn't really dispute them in that respect. She doesn't wave them away. She does try and work with them and make them, the facts fit into and influence her point of view. And the fact that she's willing to help the Doctor to try and cure Nyssa and what happens to Shayla is really nice. And I think Susan Penhaligon does a really good job of putting it together and making it work. And I quite like the way it's performed. It's a really nice role, really. We then have Sabin, played by Ian Hollard. This is a nice little role. He does come across as a young, naive person, and he's kind of building up a slight romantic relationship with Nyssa. He obviously likes Nyssa and fell for Nyssa a little bit, and Nyssa never comes across as really having any feelings in that respect back, but has a soft spot for Sabin and seems to want to work with him and, nurture him a bit more. I think there's more a sisterly relationship that Nyssa has with him more than any further deepening of that relationship. It is hinted maybe that Sabin has feelings for Nyssa throughout this, but it's not really that apparent, I think. But yeah, I like Sabin. I think Sabin's a great little character to work with Nyssa and pair up with Nyssa for this story while the Doctor pairs up with Shayla. I think it's a nice little compliment for Nyssa, and I quite like the way it's performed by Ian Hollard here, and I quite like it overall. We then have Anona, played by Romany Tennant, no relation to David. Ironically, he was in Colditz, the story before that I reviewed. This is quite a nice little role. Again, an angry, young, impressionable person, but on Quandar's side. And I quite like the way that Quandar manipulates her so much that she's so religious and so set in her ways and so enamoured in it. It's almost like a cult. And Anona's the best one portraying that because she's so loyal. She doesn't question anything and just goes along with the flow. And it's such a naivety which really works for Anona. And I quite like the way that Romany Tennant plays it. It really does come across as a great little character, and one you kind of slightly love to hate but have sympathy for as well. It's really nice. We then have three of the consul. We have Rita Davies playing Janaeus, who is one of the lead consuls. All the consuls seem to have a kind of naivety about them, but also a false confidence of their positions. And Janaeus seems to be the one that's the more reasoned out of the three consuls we hear here. And Rita Davis does a good job. We've then got Hersa, played by Mark Wilgar. He's the older of the consuls, if I remember rightly. And he seems to be a bit more scared. So he's the one that will end up want to arrest the Doctor and get the Doctor to banish more than the others. Because he's scared. He's more alien phobic. I don't know how you put that phrase, but that's what I'm thinking is the name. He is more scared and more protectionist, which is interesting characterization. We then have Narthex, played by Billy Miller, and he also plays Captain Cabe. So there's a nice little balance between them. So Narthex is kind of like the smaller role of the consuls. He's the one that's there who joins with Janaeus and Hersa at various points in the story. But Captain Cabe's characterization that Billy Miller does, he comes across as kind of like a nasty captain and just following the rules and make sure everybody's in line. But actually he has a soft spot with his family and his daughters, and he doesn't like being under Quandar's control. And I like the way that's put across. It's really nice, and I quite like the way it's played. The writing here by Lance Parkin is nice. I like the story overall. I think it's an enjoyable romp. It does establish a bit more of the lore of Traken, which is nice to have. I mean, he's not really straying too far from the established lore that we have from Keeper of Traken, but it does make an interesting point about how the Keeper came about, and that the source is actually older than the Keeper. Because the impression was the Keeper was actually always with the source, but as it turns out, the source has basically had its own free reign for itself for a long period of time. What they're saying, it's 100 generations, so about 2,500 years. So it's interesting when the Keeper does come in, and I believe it's about 500 years or so before Traken falls that Nyssa and the Doctor end up going to Traken in. So it's an interesting way it's written, but it's a nice way of developing a bit more of the lore of the Keeper of Traken. I quite like the way the adventure works. It's a bit effectual with some of the things that the Doctor ends up doing in the story, and he's carried along again. It seems that the trend of the Fifth Doctor being carried along with events is very prominent in this one. There is a bit of to and fro, and the intelligence of the Doctor does come out by the end, but it's not like the Seventh Doctor or the Sixth Doctor in the audio dramas, where they tend to take the plot on a little bit more. The Fifth Doctor seems to go with events, and that's just the way it's played, and I think Last Parkin leans into that a lot. The direction by Gary Russell, solid, it works. I get the impression all the actors were given quite clear directions of how to act it, and it doesn't come across like they've been led too hard. I don't think they've been given much free rein, like some of Nick Briggs' directions are like, but Gary Russell was always quite solid with his direction, and this one's no different. The music by Russell Stone is really just undertones. It's nothing really overpowering in it. It's nice, there's a couple of times where you get kind of 80s type synths coming up when it comes to heightened moments, especially the cliffhanger at the end of part 2 is really nice, and I like the way that's put across. Production wise, I think it's been pretty well put together overall. The one thing I don't think really comes across as well audio wise as it could do is Quandar. There are times where it's actually a bit difficult to understand what Quandar is saying because of the filters that have been put on the voice of Stephen Grief. Apart from that, it's actually quite a nice little production. It's well handled, it works very well, and I do enjoy the story quite a lot. It's not top tier Big Finish, but it is good standard fare, and it definitely deserves the rating I'm giving it, which is 3.5 TARDISes out of 5. Okay, let's see how that story stacks up with the rest of the Big Finish audio dramas I've reviewed so far. Primeval sits in at 3.5 TARDISes out of 5, with 17 other Big Finish audio adventures, including The Silence of Time, Whispers of Terror, Red Dawn, The Shadow of the Scourge, The Mutant Phase, Sword of Orion, Blood Tide, and The Eye of the Scorpion. At the bottom are still 2 stories with 3 TARDISes out of 5. They are The Land of the Dead and Winter for the Adept. And at the top, with 4.5 TARDISes out of 5, it is The Apocalypse Element. That's it from me, guys. Thanks so much for watching and listening to this audio review of Primeval. What did you think about the story? Leave a comment down below. Did you like it? Leave a comment down below. Did you not like it? Leave a comment down below. If you like this video, please like it, share it with the hashtag teamstructor. Also, please hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell so you know when a new video comes out. General rule, new video every second Sunday at 4 PM GMT. and that's when I'll next see you. A video in 2 weeks' time. Until then, guys, thanks so much for watching and listening, and you know what? I'll see you later.